Well, I'm Jim Sutherland. I've been living in this village for approximately 20 years. My work used to take me abroad very, very extensively. And what really drove me up here, apart from the fact that Killen is a lovely place which I've known for over 70 years now, the real reason is that we had a house in the south in which we lived for a very, very short time, for about 2 years, and we decided, let's sell that house in the south and come up here. My world travelling was really to assist Lloyds in deciding how much they were going to pay for claims, and in fact whether there was a claim or not. And in this respect, I went to the Far East, to New Zealand, Australia, South America, United States, Canada, all over Europe. And point of fact, at one time, I knew the timetables of the European airlines better than I knew the timetables of the London buses.
What did you do in the war?
Well, in the war, I was, of course, in the Territorial Army in the London Scottish before the war started. And I joined the London Scottish when I was walking along Birdcage Walk in London one evening, and I saw some people playing about with guns and some people in the background doing heedrum hodrum on the pipes. And so I said to a fellow who was standing beside me, I said, "What's this lot then?" That was the patois of London at that time. And he said, "Oh, that's the London Scottish. Their headquarters are just around the corner." So I decided that I would follow the band round when it went back to the headquarters, and I immediately asked for to see somebody in authority to whom I could make application to join the regiment, and that was that. And of course, they didn't actually give me the brush off, but they did indicate that there were some drills which had to be attended, and there were no vacancies at the moment. But if you come to the drills on the Mondays and the Wednesdays until the cows come home, then there might be a vacancy. Well, of course, I went down for 3 weeks, and with a fine old Scottish accent, I had no problem about getting into the London Scottish, and that was that. And then I had a jolly good time with the Scottish, actually. I enjoyed my service with them, and I was commissioned back to the Scottish, and then I went off to the staff for about a year. But the staff job folded, and so I went back to the battalion again.
Where were you fighting in the war?
Oh, chiefly Sicily and Italy. I was on duty. I was on service in North Africa, of course, but I only heard the bullets when I got to Sicily.
And I understand were you wounded at all?
Yes, I was wounded in Sicily. But it was a very slight wound, and curious enough, I didn't get any credit for it because I got malaria at the same time, and they sent me back to Egypt to recover. And then I joined the battalion again in Italy, in Anzio, in point of fact, and I was shot in the face in Anzio, and I went back to Italy again, to Egypt rather again, for hospitalization. And then I joined the battalion again on what's now known as the Battle of Rimini, which I didn't even know its name until literally a fortnight ago, when I heard that it was the biggest land battle ever fought in Italy, with something like 1.25 million soldiers fighting on both sides. And of course, my battalion was up in the mountains where it was nice and clear, and we heard a few guns going off, but we were concerned with our own little war up here, and we didn't worry much about the people down in Rimini. I remember the last night before I got wounded, I was sleeping out in the open, and we had a father and mother of a rainstorm, and I woke up with cold water running all over me, but that didn't worry me very much. But it did mean, of course, I went in soaking wet into battle the following morning. And I was asked by a friend of mine, a fellow officer in the battalion, to direct his mortar fire, because he said, "You're in a much better position to see what goes on than I am." So I said, okay, and of course I did direct the mortar fire, and the Germans didn't like this, and so they let me have some back, and I got a whole mortar bomb all to myself, which did me an awful lot of harm. But I was in good hands. Fortunately, Dr. Weaver of course, he was a medical officer in the army, and Dr. Weaver attended me along with one or two of his comrades, and I wasn't aware of it at the time, but I have since learned that they thought that my wound was so serious that it was good night nurse, or at least good night Jimmy. When we came up here, and Dr. Weaver, I found, was already looking for land here, and he saw me walking up the hill, this hill outside here. He saw me walking up outside up the hill, and he said to his wife, well, I wouldn't have believed it, but now I see that the age of miracles has not yet passed.
Tell us about the Remembrance Service. What happens in Killin at the Remembrance Service?
Well, one of the things that disappoints me about the Killin Remembrance Service is that so few people bother turning up to it. Now, there are not so many old ex-servicemen in the village now as there was maybe 10 years ago, but I think the least that we can do, those of us who came back again, is to turn up and show our remembrance of our fallen comrades. And I always have that feeling when I go back there. And of course, one has thoughts of people who died in wars, my own father, for example, in 1914, and cousins and people like that. And the men in my battalion, I think, for example, of fellows who came back from overseas, Scotsmen, like people came back from Argentina, from Rhodesia, from Australia to join the London Scottish because of the Scottish associations. And many of these didn't come back.
So you go every year?
Well, I go when I possibly can, yes. My daughter came up home this year, and she took me down, or she went down with me. And she's a very good daughter, and she thought it was right that her father should go and do his duty. And it's a very touching little service. There aren't many people there. They're a very touching little service, and it brings back memories. There must come a time when they will not be continued. But I think as long as there are some of us in the village, men who served in any of the services, we should remember it and acknowledge the sacrifice made by our comrades. I think they're very important to the village, because this village tends to be out on a limb. And I think every effort must be made to keep this village, if not in the mainstream, at least in a stream of culture and of development. I was a member, in fact, I was a founder member of the Heritage Society. I was also a founder member, along with one of the late Miss McIntyres, in the Killin Gaelic Choir. And I was a member of the Angling Association, of the green bowling thing. And what else now? Well, I think that's enough in the meantime, anyway.
How does village life now compare with how it was when you first came here?
You mean when I first came here 70 years ago?
Yes.
Oh, well, for one thing, the loss of Gaelic is quite outstanding. Quite outstanding. When I came here even 70 years ago, I would hesitate to say that Gaelic was the lingua franca in the village, but people were speaking Gaelic to each other in the streets. And it's a thing I regret. Now, and so few people show any interest in Gaelic. We have a small Gaelic circle going in the village yet, but one needs a really good Gaelic speaker to guide its studies, and we just don't have that. And I find, you see, that the majority, in fact, I think all the Gaelic speakers in the village, people who come from Barra, from South Uist, and from Lewis, in point of fact, they're loath to speak Gaelic to anybody to whom Gaelic is not a native language.
Are there many people in the village who speak Gaelic now?
Well, I don't know how many there are, but I would reckon you could count them all on two hands.
Did you learn Gaelic from a boy, or did you come to it later?
No, I came to it later, actually. In point of fact, I got my A-levels in Gaelic when I was 80 years old.
How long ago was that?
Almost exactly 10 years ago.
When you sing, do you sing in Gaelic?
Oh, sometimes, yes, sometimes. At the moment, in point of fact, I chiefly sing hymns. It's the only opportunity I have.
Any reason for that?
Well, I go to church every Sunday.
So you sing hymns at home as well?
Sometimes, indeed. In fact, my favourite hymn at home is that wonderful Welsh rugby song, "O Bread of Heaven." Lovely. The only thing is I never know when to go bass and when to go up to baritone. But I do enjoy singing that song.
Do you enjoy rugby as well?
Rugby? Well, yes, I do, up to a point. Of course, I've lost touch with it. There's not much rugby here. Well, I've lost touch with rugby for quite some time.
What about the internationals?
No, I just look at the internationals on the thing and hope that Scotland is not going to lose. One, of course, obviously hopes that the village will continue to exist and people will be as friendly as they are. That's one characteristic of the village that we both notice, the friendliness of the people. And I notice it particularly because I go down to London now and again. Here you say, hello, good morning, how are you? In London, if you say that to anybody, they think you're going to rob their pockets.
So are you optimistic or pessimistic about the future of the village?
Oh, I think I'm optimistic. Yes, I'm optimistic. You see, there's a lot of people in the village who do things, and this, quite frankly, to my mind, is a village where people help each other. Somebody's sick, so somebody takes them a hot meal, that sort of thing, and looks in to see how they are.
What do you think the main problems are for the village?
Oh, obviously work. Work is the main problem. There are so many people in the village who are just doing the best they can.